Hi, my name is Jake, and I am a bookish drummer. Welcome back to another episode of Ranking Stephen King Decades. This is episode 9, and this is also part 2 of my 2010s ranking. And if you haven't seen part 1 to this, where I basically rank my least favorite books from the 2010s, you can go check that out. And this one will be part 2, and I enjoy all of these books. Some of them are even in my top 20 Stephen King books of all time. So yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it. And for number 8 on the list, we have Joyland. Now for this one, it's not like an all-time favorite Stephen King book by any means, but it's one that I do enjoy. I've read this one twice now, and I would give it 3.5 stars. It's one of the rare Stephen King books that's written in first person, and whenever Stephen King tends to write in first person, I tend to enjoy it. He doesn't do it that often. Most of the time he's writing in third person from multiple perspectives for most of his books. But when he does write in first person, I do enjoy it a lot. And this one is written from the first person point of view of a college student who kind of breaks up with this girl, and he during the summer he goes to a summer job to work at a carnival, and you get just slice of life like working at a carnival, and it's really good. And then also it's Stephen King, so it takes a lot of dark turns. I don't want to necessarily say what happens in this book, but some weird wacky stuff happens, and it's very good. Like I said, I wouldn't consider it like an all-time favorite Stephen King book, but it is still really good, and I know it has its fans. And it also is one of the hard case crime books. Probably not really a hard case crime, but whatever. It's still really good. So I don't have too much more to say about it other than I do enjoy it, and it's definitely a book I could see myself rereading sometime in the near future. So yeah, for those reasons, I put it at number 8 on the list. Coming in at number 7 on the list is Mr. Mercedes, which is the very first book in the Bill Hodges trilogy. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about it because I do have a dedicated book review for this book. So if you want to get my non-spoilery and possibly spoilery thoughts, go check out that video. I do enjoy this one. Like I mentioned in my part 1 of the 2010s rankings, Finders Keepers is my favorite, and you'll see that later on the list. And End of Watch, which is book 3, is definitely my least favorite. One of my least favorite Stephen King books. For this one, kind of in the middle. Like Finders Keepers is fantastic. End of Watch is bleh. This one is decent. Like I give it 3.5 stars. It's good. It's got a really good plot, but none of the characters are like any of my all-time favorite Stephen King characters. They're fine. Like Bill Hodges is fine. The villain is pretty good. Holly, he's a fan favorite, and King loves writing about Holly. She's fine in this one. Like overall, this book is just fine. Like it's a fun, addictive book to read because of the plot, but for me, the character and the character development is lacking a bit. But it is still fun, and so for those reasons, I would put this at number 7 on the list. And for number 6 on the list, we have Wendys Button Box. And this is definitely one of my all-time favorite Stephen King novellas. And when this came out, I didn't want to pay full price for it, so I kind of just walked into a Barnes& and Noble, read it in its entirety, and left, which was a very fun experience. I really enjoyed this, and I've recently had to reread it, for ranking all of the novellas, and I definitely enjoyed it. I think I enjoyed it more the first time, actually. Upon a reread, knowing what's going to happen, it loses a bit of its charm for me, but it's still really good nonetheless. Also, it doesn't help that the sequel to this, Gwendy's Magic Feather, is really bad. Like, I did not enjoy that book at all. So, thinking about that book, I know it's not fair because that one is written solely by Richard Chismar, and this one is a collaboration between him and Stephen King, but man, reading this book knowing kind of where Gwendy goes after this with that sequel, and then eventually I will read Final Task probably in October. It does lose a little bit of its charm for me, but still, overall, it's really good. It has a lot of heart-wrenching themes and character moments in this book. It's really good. It's one of Stephen King's best novellas. So for all of those reasons, I put Gwendy's Button Box at number 6 on the list. And now we get to the top 5. And all of these books I would consider some of my all-time favorite Stephen King books. I'm pretty sure all of these books I would put in my top 25. And for reference, I think Stephen King has around 75. So definitely the top echelon of Stephen King. I love all of these books. And this one, it comes in at number 5, and that would be Revival. And this one I'm very much interested in rereading. I will be rereading it in October during the Stephen King readathon. Shameless plug. I loved this book when I first read it, but it's been such a long time since I've actually read it that I'm very much interested in going back and see what I think about it the second time around. The main thing that I remember about this book is the very beginning and the very ending. The very ending, or actually I should say the very beginning and the very ending, are very heart-wrenching for different reasons. Like, this is a very, very nihilistic book. That ending, if you read this book, you will never forget the ending to this book. One of the best, if not the best, Stephen King ending ever. It's so dark and nihilistic, and it's so good. It's unforgettable. But for the main reason I want to go back and reread it is because I don't remember everything that happens in the middle. And I'm very much excited to give it a second shot, see how much I like it. But from what I remember, it's so good, and I'm so excited to go back and reread it. I love this book. And yeah, for all of those reasons, and probably more that I'm forgetting, Revival is number 5 on the list. And for number 4 on my list, we have Finders Keepers, which is obviously, like I said, the second book in the Bill Hodges trilogy. Easily my favorite book in the trilogy. And for me, I think the main reason is because Bill Hodges and the rest of his gang, the people that he works with, is absent throughout a lot of this book. Like, you read like the first, I don't even remember, like 100, 150 pages, they're not even in it. Like, you just get introduced to this thing that happens and these characters, and I don't even really want to spoil what happens. It's really good and really compelling, and you forget for a hot minute that this is even a Bill Hodges book. For me, I really wish Stephen King would have just made this a standalone book. Like, if Mr. Mercedes was a standalone, like, detective, like Bill Hodges book, and then he made this one separate, like, also as a standalone, I think I would have preferred that. The Bill Hodges stuff in here is fine, but for me, my main enjoyment for this awesome book is the stuff that has really nothing to do with Bill Hodges. It's so good and so compelling. Like, those first 150 pages or so are just some of the best Stephen King has ever written, in my mind. So another one that I'm very excited to go back and reread. I don't know if I'll have enough time to do it in October, but I would love to get to it. I love this book. And like I said, easily my favorite in the Bill Hodges trilogy. So, yeah, for number 4 on the list, it has to be Finders Keepers. And coming in at number 3 on the list, we have The Outsider. Now, this is yet again another book that I was super excited to read when it first came out. And when it first came out, I basically only knew the premise of this guy that was being charged with a crime that he didn't commit. And basically, you get a little further into the story and you realize that there's evidence that places him at the scene of the crime, but also at the same time, there's video evidence of him miles and miles away from the scene of the crime. So how could he be in 2 places at once? And that was kind of the thing that drives the story forward, and that I was super interested in, like, okay, how is this going to happen? And it's also another case of Stephen King kind of switching gears like halfway through the book. He does this with a lot of books. Sometimes it doesn't work very well, like with Fairy Tale. I did a book review for Fairy Tale, and he definitely does that, and it did not work. But then other times with books, some of my all-time favorite Stephen King books, like Billy Summers and The Dead Zone, my all-time favorite, he does that a lot. And for this book, I think it works out brilliantly because the first half of this book is more along the lines of that thriller, detective kind of book. And then it switches gears, and I don't want to necessarily say how it does or what it switches to, but it's really well done. And this book is awesome. The only minor complaint is the very ending. The very ending, I can't talk about it, but I had a minor complaint with it. But overall, this book is just so good and so compelling, and I can't wait to reread it. I will probably, again, reread it in October, probably. It's so good, and yeah, definitely one of my favorites. It's definitely in my top 20, and for all of those reasons, it comes in at number 3 on the list. And coming in at number 2 on the list, we actually have Dr. Sleep, which of course is famously the sequel to The Shining. And I kind of have the unpopular opinion that Dr. Sleep is better than The Shining. Well, maybe not necessarily better than The Shining, but for me, I actually get more enjoyment out of reading Dr. Sleep versus reading The Shining. Because I grew up, here's kind of my reasoning for all of this. I grew up watching The Shining movie, and that's still my favorite horror movie of all time. It's overall my second favorite movie of all time, of course, second to only Pulp Fiction. And so I grew up watching that movie, and then The Shining was one of the very first Stephen King horror books I read when I got back into reading in college, and I really did enjoy it, and I actually read it because Dr. Sleep was coming out, and I was super excited to read it. And when I read Dr. Sleep, I was super enthralled by getting Danny Torrance, I think it's like 35 or 40 years later, and it was just so interesting, like to see Danny as an adult, and I just loved it. And actually, the first time I read it, The Shining I did like more than Dr. Sleep, but upon a reread, because I've read both of them twice now, I actually preferred Dr. Sleep to The Shining. I think it's just a more, I don't even know how to describe it. It's more engaging, and it's just more interesting just because I've watched The Shining so many times. Like I've been I've just had that story consumed so many times. Like going back to read Dr. Sleep, it's just more refreshing to me now. So I wouldn't say it's objectively better, but for me, I get more enjoyment out of reading Dr. Sleep, if that makes any sense at all. So yeah, for me, Dr. Sleep is easily one of Stephen King's best books. I'd probably put it in my top 20, possibly top 15. I love it. And yeah, I would put it at number 2 on the list here. And finally, coming in at number 1 for my 2010s ranking for Stephen King books, it would have to be Full Dark, No Stars, which is actually a novella collection. And if you've seen my videos and you've seen my rankings of all of Stephen King's novellas, you'll know that I think Stephen King actually does novellas more consistently good or better than a lot of his other types of stories that he does. Like, he has great novels, but he also has bad novels. He has great short stories, but he also has a lot of bad short stories. For novellas, he's way more consistent, and I think he's actually at his best writing novellas. And for this one, there's 4 novellas. They're all great. I love all of them. And I just love his novellas. And of course, with the title like Full Dark, No Stars, you know going into it that all of these novellas are going to be dark. And they're sort of dark in their own unique ways. Like, you've got 1922, which the second time I read this, I kind of read it slightly as a dark comedy. Like, especially doing the audiobook, I don't know who narrated it, but whoever did it, like, I was just laughing out loud at some of the stuff that happens in that, because it's essentially this wife and husband who own this farm, and the wife is threatening to divorce and leave him, and the husband and the son don't want to leave their farm, so they kind of come up with this scheme to kill her. And it's so wacky, and it's so good, and it's very terrifying at moments. And then you've got another one like Big Driver, which is one of the darkest ones in here, because it's basically a rape revenge tale, and it's so well done, but really hard to read at times. And then you've got Fair Extension, which is definitely a dark comedy, almost like a twisted Stephen King perverse fairy tale in a way. It's really nihilistic and really good. And then you've got A Good Marriage, which of course is essentially about a woman discovering that her husband has been a serial killer. And that one is really gripping. All of these stories, all of these novellas in here are just top notch. Love this. It probably sits just outside my overall top 10 Stephen King books, but it would probably be in my top 15, maybe like number 12 or so. It'll be interesting ranking all of Stephen King's novels when I'm done with this. But yeah, just know that I love this novella collection, and it is my favorite from the 2010s. All right, so that wraps up my rankings for 2010's Stephen King novels and books. And yeah, what do you guys think of my list? What do you guys think of me having Full Dark, No Stars as my all-time favorite King book from the 2010s? Do you agree with me on some of my list here, or do you severely disagree with me? Either way, I want to chat about it in the comments with y'all, so leave a comment and we'll chat about it. Also, I forgot to mention, look forward to me eventually ranking the 2020s. That will only have 5 books, so that'll kind of be just like a bonus throwaway episode, but it'll still be fun to talk about his newest releases and rank all of those. And also look forward to me ranking the decades. Like, what is my least favorite Stephen King decade, and what is my all-time favorite Stephen King decade? That'll be a lot of fun to talk about and debate with y'all in the comments. And then eventually my big plan is to rank all of Stephen King's novels again, but do it in a more condensed fashion, where I just make one video that's like 15 or 20 minutes long, and I rank all of them and just say like 1 or 2 sentences about all of them. So look forward to that in the near future, maybe sometime in October, maybe November. I really don't know yet, but look forward to all of that in the near future. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my YouTube channel and the Book Astronomer Discord. And if you'd like to further support me financially, go check out my Patreon page. And I also have my Amazon wish list if anyone would like to buy me a book. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a fantastic day.